tabloid. Is this the end of the world? I mean, this is...
All right, we apparently have lost our satellite to London, where Christiane Amanpour was just giving us the British reaction to the catastrophe that the United States witnessed yesterday. We will hope to bring her back a little bit later this morning. She also gave us some insights as to how the Prime Minister is dealing with this. He just very recently had a long conversation, 20-minute conversation with President Bush, as there is continued talk about what kind of collective effort needs to be made to fight this brand of terrorism. Let's catch up with Kyra Phillips right now, that has some more thoughts on how the nation will continue to react to what happened in Pennsylvania yesterday, what happened at the Pentagon, and the twin attacks here in New York City. Kyra?
Paula, thank you. Reaction is definitely the key word here. We're going to take you actually live to Logan Airport, and that is where two of the hijacked planes came from. We're going to turn it over to our Bill Delaney, who's live at the command center there. Bill, can you tell us what's happening right now within the center?
Well, thank you, Kyra. Hundreds of federal, state, and local police, led by the FBI, now fanning out here in the Boston area to try to determine how these hijackers could have gotten on the two planes that left Boston yesterday morning and ended up crashing into the World Trade Center. The question, was there some kind of a terrorist cell here in Boston that enabled these hijackers to lay the groundwork for what they did? Now, a security expert I spoke to here this morning, Kyra, said in many ways Boston is an ideal place for that sort of thing. It is a small city but a major city, and importantly, it's near an international border, Canada. Now, we know before the millennium, an Algerian was arrested on the Vermont border. This Algerian found to have ties to another Algerian who tried at that time to cross into Washington State for a terrorist action at the time of the millennium in Seattle. So we've seen that sort of thing here before. Also, we don't know if Arabs were involved in this, but if they were, there is a sizable Arab community here in Boston. It's a place one could obtain some anonymity, this security source said to me. Now, there are reports here, Kyra, this morning of several suspects being looked at who may have been involved in this hijacking. The Boston Herald newspaper reporting 2 brothers may have been involved, both carrying United Arab Emirates passports, one of them a trained pilot. Also, importantly, Kyra, a rented car taken from the central parking garage here at Logan Airport yesterday. Now, this rented car reportedly contained Arab language training manuals for flying a commercial aircraft. Now, the authorities focused on this car because a passenger who left here on a flight from Boston yesterday, when he arrived at his destination and found out about the terrorist actions, realized that he had had an altercation with several Arab men in the central parking garage. He called authorities, and they are looking at this vehicle. I should also mention that earlier this year, the FBI did determine that in the late 90s there were Arab men here, 2 with ties to the Osama bin Laden organization. They left suddenly in the late 90s, but one of them, a man named Bassam Kanj, had lived here for some 15 years working as a cab driver. He was subsequently killed in Lebanon in an attack on the Lebanese army, financed, security sources believe, by Osama bin Laden. The other Arab, Rail Hijazi, also was a cab driver here in Boston. He is in jail in Jordan for an involvement in a plan to blow up a hotel in Jordan that contained mostly American and Israeli tourists at the time of the millennium. So there have been traces of people tied to Osama bin Laden, if indeed Osama bin Laden was involved in this in the past here in Boston. And as I say, hundreds of federal, state, and local investigators now trying to sort out how hijackers got on those 2 planes here at Logan Airport yesterday.
Our Bill Delaney, thank you very much. Those are definitely riveting details. We'll continue to follow up with you at Logan Airport. Miles, we're going to take it back over to you at the desk.
All right, thank you very much, Kyra. Live pictures from the Pentagon right now. Let's take a look at the scene that is unfolding as the effort there continues. Not a lot of hope this morning. Matter of fact, no hope of finding any survivors inside the wreckage there of the Army side of the Pentagon. 5-sided building, obviously, 5 stories. Some portions of it are opened, and some portion of the 20,000 workers who typically report there every day are at work there on what is, of course, not a normal day, but the routine will try to continue. There was immediately before we took this live image, there was a convoy of vehicles. There you see them. This is a tape image which came down just a few moments ago. Convoy of vehicles there. We can presume they are part of the effort to continue the salvage efforts there at the Pentagon. We'll keep you posted as events unfold there. Back now to a live picture. Let's do a quick recap. It has now been 24 hours since the nightmare began and everything really changed. Today we are revealing more evidence of just how horrific it all was. In New York this morning, a frantic search and rescue effort continues. Crews have found some survivors amid the rubble of what was the World Trade Center. We underscore that point. Leveled the World Trade Center. Authorities tell CNN at least 9 people have been found alive this morning, but the death toll from the terrorist attacks is expected to be staggering. All we know now is it will be in the thousands. The horror began to unfold 24 hours ago as a plane tore through the first of the World Trade Center towers. This picture came in overnight. It's a different angle on it. Ripped into the building, created a huge fireball. That was American Airlines Flight 11, a 767 with 81 passengers, 11 crew members. It was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles, somewhere over the Adirondack Mountains. It took a sharp detour to the south. Now, 18 minutes later, a second jet slammed in to the other tower of the World Trade Center, both of them 110 stories high. This is United Flight 175. Also point of origin was Boston, also intended destination of Los Angeles. Both of those aircraft heavily laden with fuel for the transcontinental flight. 56 passengers, 9 crew members on board that plane. We've had reports from cellular telephone conversations that were managed to be delivered from these planes that there were knife-wielding suspects who commandeered these aircraft and were at the controls of the aircraft at the time. Now, both World Trade Center towers, of course, eventually collapsed. Here, as we see right here, the second tower imploding. That was at about 10 o'clock Eastern time yesterday. Those the gleaming symbols of New York for more than 20 years now, symbol of our wealth, symbol of U.S. prosperity. All of it now reduced to rubble today, and there are 5 sub-floors there. And earlier in our reporting, Gary Tuckman was indicating there is some hope that there may be additional survivors deep beneath that rubble. An amazing Herculean effort underway right now to try to find people who might be alive in that pile of rubble, many thousands of tons. At the Pentagon this morning, firefighters poured more water on the smoldering building damaged by the suicide plane attack. That was American Airlines Flight 77, 757, Dulles to Los Angeles, its intended destination. 58 passengers, 6 crew members, 800 people killed in that particular attack. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld says the Pentagon is in fact open for business today. We should say portions of the Pentagon, those deemed fit and those deemed safe for occupants. But the concern about that structural integrity will keep everybody out but the essential personnel, at least for today. Still no word on exactly how many people were injured total in that attack. We are getting ballpark estimates of, as we said, 800 people killed in that attack. The attack at the heart of the U.S. financial center is reverberating throughout world markets today. In Japan, the Nikkei average plunged below 10,000 for the first time in 17 years. European stock market averages are undergoing sharp price swings today. Most opened lower and showed some gains before moving lower again. U.S. financial markets will remain closed today. The World Trade Center is, of course, at the heart of the financial district for this country. Across the U.S., there are some cases of soaring gas prices, which we could probably infer to be a bit of profiteering. In some places, the price jumped to nearly $5 a gallon. The nation's largest oil companies are trying to ease fears by pledging to keep distribution steady. That brings you up to date this morning on a morning that will be a morning that we are forever changed. Send it back to Paula Zahn in New York. Paula?
Miles, I want to try to give you an idea of what life is actually like in New York City today, drastically different from an average weekday. As you look at the streets, there is a fraction of the traffic you'd normally see. You'd usually see bumper-to-bumper traffic at that corner at this time of the morning. The reason for this is that all public schools are closed, private schools, parochial schools. The Dow Jones is closed, the NASDAQ is closed. All businesses south of 14th Street, which is not far from this platform, are closed today. You still have bridges and tunnels, inbound bridges and tunnels closed at this hour. So you might describe the city as in a state of paralysis. Many companies advising their workers to stay at home today. And as folks stay at home, they're just beginning to come to grips with how their city has changed. I want to go to Gary Tuchman right now, who has gotten closer than just about anyone this morning to that perimeter area surrounding the World Trade Center. Gary, can you give us an update now on any of the rescues underway?
Well, first of all, Paul, it was 24 hours close to this very moment that the United Airlines plane went through the South Tower of the World Trade Center. And that's where the South Tower used to stand. You can see the skeleton of it right now. And in the foreground, you see dozens of members of the Army National Guard who are now on the streets of Lower Manhattan here, protecting New York City at the site we never thought we'd ever see in New York City, let alone the United States. Members of the National Guard like this standing out there with their helmets on, guns on their sides. But that's the situation here right now in Lower Manhattan on the corner of Church and Reed Street, normally a very busy place. This would be morning rush hour. Now it's quiet. No members of the public are allowed out here right now. It's just emergency officials, police, the Army National Guard, and some members of the media who've gotten as close as we can. We are using right now a video telephone because we're in a place where we can't use our normal live truck to give you a live signal, and that's why we have this particular signal with you right now. And with us right now is an officer who's been on the scene for more than 12 hours. This is Officer Wayne Diana. He's with the South Plainfield, New Jersey Police Department. Sir, tell me what the scene was like for you.
We got in, they bust us in from New Jersey into Staten Island, and they brought us over on the ferry. We started out at the lower end and walked up. We wound up in Ground Zero at about sometime, I guess, around midnight, searching for survivors. Myself and two other officers from my department were in the alley in the road between the two towers. We spent about 4 or 5 hours going through vehicles, looking under vehicles. At one point, we got into I guess it would be the South Tower. The second floor of the South Tower, there's a daycare center, apparently employee daycare center. We searched through there, we found nothing. Apparently those people were able to get out. It's a war zone. It's an absolute war zone. It's the worst thing I've ever seen.
How many people would you say are down there right now?
Rescue workers, thousands. They're just all over the place. I mean, the city has come together. Every possible city agency you could think of is down there. Private contractors in there with heavy equipment moving huge pieces of building and steel, and police cars and fire trucks that are wrecked down there. They're in the process of moving those out now with forklifts. It's going to be a long operation.
We've reported that 9 survivors have been found. 6 of them members of the New York City Fire Department, 3 Port Authority of New York and New Jersey police officers. Did you see any survivors?
We didn't see anybody. We had already pulled out of the Ground Zero area before that rescue operation concluded. We went back a couple blocks outside of the Ground Zero area and went to sleep on the sidewalk. We slept for about 2 or 3 hours, and we came back in. It's a very frustrating effort because there's just so much debris that you can't get near where the people who may have survived the explosion are.
Frustrating and frightening. How horrible has this been for you?
It's scary. It's scary. Life as you and I know it has changed in this country. I mean, we've always felt that the United States of America was the safest place in the world, and we're wondering now whether that's still the case.
Officer, thanks for joining us. Good work out there for the last 12 hours. I want to clarify the damage that occurred here. We all know that the 2 big towers, the 110-story towers, 1 World Trade Center and 2 World Trade Center both came down. We are told that when 1 World Trade Center came down, it fell on a smaller building called the 4 World Trade Center building. And then many of you know yesterday afternoon, the 7 World Trade Center building, another 47-story building, also came down. So 4 of the World Trade Center buildings in the complex have been destroyed. Paula, back to you.
Gary, there is so much we've heard over the last 24 hours. You made it clear. It literally was just about 24 hours that the second hijacked airliner slammed into South Tower.